The Dark Blood Covenant. Chapter 1, Ishal. The golden hills were hot as the men worked the hay onto the large wagons. Ishal aching moved his pitchfork despite his burning muscles. Most of the other men working the fields had already fallen back. They rested on their tools, or leaned up against the wagon. Sweat dropped down across Ishal's brow, and onto his face. He would have given anything for a straw hat to cover his copper-colored curls. Something to protect him from the burning sun pounding down on him. It was not until the last bit of grass was lifted that he stopped to raise the back of his hand to wipe his brow, leaving a trail of hay in his hair for his efforts. One of the other field hands gave him a hearty clap on the back. In his exhausted state, Ishal staggered forward before recovering his balance, the weariness causing his knees to wobble just a little. "Ishal, you're a good man, but you work too hard. Slow down or you will make the rest of us look bad." Ishal gave the man a deep sigh, an appreciative smile sliding to his sunburned features. "I need to make a good impression on the current lord of these fields, if I want to be finding enough work to keep my family fed. That will not be an issue. The foreman has already been around a few times today, Ishal. He is pretty impressed with your efforts." One of the older men called from his seat on the wagon. "You keep this up, and I say you might make it into the stables, and out of this blasted sun. But that would mean his face wouldn't be as red as his hair. We cannot be having that now, can we?" One of the other men, working with them, laughed. It was followed by quite a few hearty chuckles. Ishal ignored the jab at his hair color. It was something he was used to. A legacy from his family handed down through the generations. That may stop with him, since his young son had been born with the dark chestnut locks of his mother. Thoughts of his family always drove Ishal on. Dreams of a better life for his small family had brought him from Windhaven. It had been his idea to leave their homeland to travel to Siri Lursa, the prosperous kingdom offering generous bounty to those who lived there. Thanks to the namesake goddess Siri Lursa, who supposedly made this area her home in ancient times. Ishal had heard of an opening in the kingdom for men willing to tend parcels of land in the name of the royal family. The fee for the ground was reasonable and the rewards were great. Ishal was one of the youngest of a rather large family. A chance to strike out on his own, giving him much-needed breathing room. "We are done for the day." The wagon driver waved to Ishal, trying to gain his attention. "This one's headed to Ellistown. You want to ride along, Ishal? I am not about to turn that offer down." Ishal reached out to grab hold of the old wooden wagon, and leapt up next to the man. "Getting off my feet for a bit. At least, before the wife gets a hold of me. She's a handful, I take it." The man slapped the reins down on the horse, and the cart lumbered forward at a slow rocking pace. But it quickened a bit as the momentum picked up. They turned out of the field and onto the hard-packed dirt roads that crossed the region. "Laramie?" Ishal smiled, a goofy grin of a man completely in love. The look was not wasted on the older fellow. "No, she's a saint to put up with me. My Mira is a bit of a battle axe, but don't be telling her I told you so." The wagon driver laughed, and looked forward at his team, "But then with the 5 unruly children we have, I do not blame her. Do you have any little ones?" "I have a son. We have one on the way. If we had known Laramie was with child, I would never have dragged her out here." Ishal shook his head. It was part of his worry that the stress of everything would put undue pressure on Laramie. This was plain old bad timing. It was not as if he did not desire more children, but it certainly compounded his worries. Laramie had taken it in stride with her can-do attitude. She had even taken a job helping in the kitchen at the inn they were staying at. A task that could not be undertaken if his 4-year-old son, Triali, was not so well behaved. The boy was miraculous. He was the next thing to perfect, if you were to hear Laramie talk about him. Ishal could not help but agree with her. If the new baby was anything like Triali, they would be fine, despite the situation. Leaning his head back against a large wooden plank on the wagon to rest. These days were long and hard. It would not be forever. Until then there was nothing left to do but work and sleep. For the moment he chose the latter and drifted off, The jerking stop of the wagon brought Ishal rudely awake. The driver slapping him upside the arm to gain his attention. "By the goddess, is that what I think it is?" The man's voice was thick with worry. The tone caused Ishal to blink the sleep from his forest green eyes. Their remains slitted against the bright light that assaulted him. He scanned the horizon, and looked out to where the driver had indicated. There was no mistaking the great columns of dark smoke that rose from the earth. They stained the sky an ominous gray. Could Ellistown be on fire? The driver muttered just loud enough for Ishal to hear. Raising a hand to shield his eyes from the sun, Ishal looked down over the town just past the cluster of outskirting trees. "It sure is. We need to get down there to help." Concern for his family foremost on his mind. Fire was no small threat to a place of Ellistown's size. The buildings so bundled together they went up one after the other. It would take quite the effort to save it from becoming a field of ash. The older man cracked the reins. The hay cart rolling down over the hill with greater speed. Ishal was impressed at the control of his companion. On the slope the fully loaded wagon could go over to its side if not expertly handled. But Ishal was not of the mind to complain. The sooner he was in town the faster he would be assured Laramie and Triali were all right. As they entered the woodline people began to appear. They were running from the village in great haste. Some carrying a few possessions. Others dragging their children behind them. Most just fleeing as fast as they could with looks of panic and fear. None bothering to take the time to speak up as to the problem. Confused, Ishal jumped down and grabbed a man as he tried to rush past him. His hand catching on the back of the other man's shirt. The fellow was in such desperation to escape the fabric threatened to tear right off his body. Working for a better hold, and pulling the man back Ishal had to duck under a fist that flew out at him. Ishal refused to let go. He was looking for answers, and he would have them. "Let me go. We have to run." There was flailing of arms as the man struggled to get away in a state of crazed hysteria. Ishal responded to the man's words in kind. He threw out a punch that connected to the man's jaw. The impact throwing the fellow to the ground. Standing over him, Ishal shook his hand trying to wave away the pain in his knuckles. "Come back to yourself. What is happening in town that has put you in a state like this?" "Demons, you moron. It's Harith's demon horde come to kill us." He struggled to his feet. Looking behind Ishal to make sure the threat was not already close behind. "We have to flee as far as we can, before they come for us." The driver of the wagon swore loudly. Ishal looked back and could see from the older gentleman's expression he knew exactly what the townsman spoke of. "What of the others?" Ishal demanded as he turned his attention back on the townsman. Knowing that it was no simple fire ravaging the town was setting him in a fighting mood. There was no way he would cower and run with Laramie in harm's way. Not when he could do something about it. "I have no idea. Those demons are tearing through the town. Setting fire to all of it. I saw some of them dragging people they had captured toward the center square. But you have to listen, I am telling you to run. It's the only chance we got when confronted with these kind of monsters." That was all Ishal got from the man before he retreated. More fleeing townsmen pushing past him as he stood in stunned silence at the cowardice being displayed. He could not believe what he was seeing. It was like the whole of humanity had lost its will to fight in the face of this enemy. "Get up here. We have to get to Ellistown and help defend it." The driver shouted to Ishal, an angry look upon his face. "These people will be of no use to us. The rats are always the first to flee when danger is near." Ishal wasted no time joining the man back up on the wagon. Climbing to the top of the hay mound, and looked over the townsfolk rushing past. Ishal shouted, "Why do you all flee? Your family and friends live in that town. It is your home. Are you just going to let these monsters take that from you?" Someone had to be the voice of reason. A wake-up call to what they were leaving behind. A few people stopped and looked up at him. One woman turned holding a child to her side. "You are insane. You have not seen them yourself yet. There is no way we can stand against that horde. I do not need to see them. My family is there. Ishal called back to her with somber eyes. At least she had stopped and questioned him. The rest seemed to pay him no heed at all. With a sigh of exasperation, Ishal realized there was no help for them here. Looking to the driver, "What are you waiting for? Let's move, man." The wagon rolled forward, and Ishal dug through the hay until he pulled up a sickle. A hand reached out and took it from him. Ishal looked around him to see several people climbing aboard. So his words had stirred some fight. Nodding to himself, he pulled up a pitchfork. He looked over the bent tongs with a frown. The weapon of farmers and stable hands. It was all he had. It would have to be enough. The wagon broke the edge of the village and Ishal got his first sight of the demons. Jumping from the wagon into a group of tiny imps that were tormenting a woman. She was protecting two small children. Ishal would rather search for Laramie, but the pair the woman was in could not go unaided. The pitchfork's first thrust impaled on an imp. Pulling back, the little body stayed skewered, as Ishal turned to sweep the handle around, knocking four more back. A path cleared, he moved to stand by the quaking woman. She reached for Ishal and slid her slim body behind him. Ishal wished he could say something comforting to her, but that was impossible looking out at the scene before him. The men and women he had brought back with him were resisting well. Still, the amount of demons had surpassed what Ishal was expecting. This was no army. It was a horde. There was nothing to do but fight on against their swarming numbers. By the time he had gotten the woman and the children back to the wagon, she was no longer cowering behind him. Pulling up aboard, she was swinging with all she had at the obnoxious little imps. Doing a fine job keeping their grasping claws from the children. Ishal surveyed the fighting around him. The demons were being driven back. At first, one might have thought this was a good thing. But Ishal saw it for the danger it was. Spread out, the humans that were rebelling against the invasion would be isolated to even larger groups of demons. Outnumbered with no support or avenue of escape, they would become just as helpless as before. It could not happen. Use the wagon as a rally point. Ishal called out to all that could hear him. Make sure you stay close to each other. Scrambling over the wagon for a better view of the fighting, Ishal drew in heavy breaths. Many of the people did as he suggested immediately. Those that did not were too close in combat to adhere to the orders. Some had already been led so far away it was more likely they did not hear the words of wisdom he had imparted. Jumping down, he rushed forward to aid them. He stood shoulder to shoulder with one man, as he fought with a demon of humanoid form. The horns on the monster's head lowered, and Ishal twisted aside, barely able to avoid the strike. The man he was aiding used the demon's awkward position to his advantage. A solid blow to the demon's side, sending it onto the ground. Ishal raised his pitchfork high and attempted to drive it into the demon's skull. The metal tongs were not strong enough to penetrate the thick skull. One of the metal points bending back, but the other hit a vulnerable eye. The howl of pain as Ishal pulled back, readying for another blow. The creature rolled to its side and, grabbing its eye, came to its feet. Hissing angrily, before them in an intimidating display of bravado. Both men inched back, unsure of the demon's intent. It raised its free arm for a moment as if intending to continue the fighting. Then it turned and rushed off for reinforcements. The man next to Ishal growled in anger. That will show him. He turned to look for another fight. Ishal grabbed his arm in a firm hold, making sure to meet the other man's eyes. No, my friend. Keep ranks around the wagon. Help anyone you see, and bring them back to that point. Nodding slowly, a devilish light of amusement in the man's eyes, as he barked back, let them come to us, I take it. All right then. Let it be as you want it. Ishal watched the man rush back until his attention was diverted by another sight further into town. He leveled his green eyes on a horse being pulled along by a demon. It was just what he needed. I will be back. He called over his shoulder. It was foolish to do exactly what he was warning the others not to. But he had no choice. Laramie was still out there somewhere with Trioli. Rushing in with speed born of desperation, Ishal worked his way down the street. No demons moved to impede his progress, for that he was thankful. closing the distance to the monster until he was able to lift a vicious snap kick to the demon's back. The attack had been completely unexpected on the demon's part. It flew forward, skidding along the ground until it came to rest against a wall. Taking advantage of the creature's dazed state, Ishal grabbed up the reins. They had been hanging loosely over the horse's neck. Ishal grabbed a handful of mane and with a mighty leap, dropped on the animal's back. He pulled the mount around, and prayed it was decently trained. Applying his heels, the horse bolted forward. Ishal knew he had to make it to the center of town. Only by freeing the people gathered there, could he assure himself of Laramie and Triali's well-being. Luck was on his side. The horse was fast, impressively so. The demons that tried to pull him down either failed to grab him, or were thrown back with the speed of the mount. The square coming into view. The humans were huddled in a tight circle. The demons pushing through them. Larger monsters moved around the group, pulling a few out. A man fought back as he was pulled from the group. The demonic group conversing in a strange tongue. Ishal lifted his weapon over his head and rushed in. His eyes scanning the humans and to his relief not seeing Laramie or Triali in their numbers. When he burst into the town center, he saw the groups of people that had been taken captive by the invading army. So many, it was staggering to Ishal's mind. He had not realized this many people were in residence in Ellistown. However, he did not have time to sit there and gawk. His presence was detected almost instantly. The demons were completely unwilling to give up their prize, and Ishal could just be added to their haul. More glory for Haraith's conquest of Siri Lursa. Stromain. In a battle tactic he was becoming used to, the imp swarms flew at him first. The horse stamped its hoofs and tried to rear away from the wall of danger. Only by sheer strength was Ishal able to keep the mount in place. With little choice he took up his reins in one hand to control the mount. The other gripped the pitchfork, readying for the first wave. Like a man possessed, Ishal fought from the horse's back. The people clustered together in the center of a demon circle screaming to him for help. Ishal was barely able to keep the demons from pulling his horse down. The pitchfork proved to be little defense. Attention on the imp swarming his mount, he did not see one of the larger demons closing in on him. One mighty swing catching his torso and launching him through the air. It was no graceful fall. Landing hard on the earth, and rolling to his side in great pain. He struggled for breath, wondering if he had broken a few ribs in the fall. The lesser demons were on him in a flash. They seized him by each arm, and pulled him to his feet. Still the demons had made an error in not weighting down his legs. Kicking out to the one on his left and knocking it off his arm. With his hand free he reached out and grabbed the demon on his right arm. Locking his fingers around its face. Pushing his body forward he took it down while pulling his right arm free. The right hook followed. For a human, Ishal displayed great tenacity of spirit. This enforced his efforts to keep from being subdued against the innumerable odds that converge on him. The demons cheered in joy at unexpected change in events. The human was giving them a fine show. Several jumping and trying to reclaim the man's freedom. They had better luck taking down his horse. Ishal twisted and fought with stamina belying his race. He had grown up in a large family, and scrapping with his own brothers had left him a skilled grappler. The demons who tried to climb on top of him found themselves flung aside. Those that tried to hit him found their blows returned in force. The large demon that had brought Ishal off his mount, watched with annoyance. Charging in, he worked his way through his own horde. When he was able to grab the man with his greater strength, pulling Ishal up in its huge paw. Ishal stared out at the horrid visage before him. The monster was used to humans that cowered before him, and was not prepared for the booted feet that slammed into its face. A roar of pain rippled through the area. Ishal was lifted and slammed to the ground. The impact knocking the air from his lungs again. The pain in his ribs left no doubt anymore. They were certainly broken now. He pushed up on his arms. He could not stop the cough, and white-hot agony assaulted him. The taste of blood in his mouth. A huge foot landed on Ishal's back. the outraged demon applying slow merciless pressure trying to crush the human under its arched claws. "Cease!" a voice called out. The authority within its bearing, and an unmistakable arrogance no human could master. Ishal wished he could lift his head even a little. He wanted to see who, or what, had spoken that single word. Still pinned under such great weight, it was all he could do to draw enough breath to remain conscious. "That one," the voice said, even closer now. "Do not kill him. He will be Harith's. The power in him is quite amazing." The pressure was released almost immediately. They yanked him up quickly. But it did not lessen the pain of the movement to his damaged form. Ishal was grabbed by two larger demons that took brutal hold of his arms. Several imps latching themselves to his legs, until he could not even flex his muscles without the tightening of their grip. Their tiny claws sinking their way into the flesh of his calves and thighs like stinging needles. A demon stared at him with a horrible twisted face. It was a thing out of nightmares. Ishal dropped his head, and glared, complete rebellion plastered on his features. No sign of fear for the demons to feed on filtered through. His anger at their presence here became his force of will. This reaction only seemed to please the one before him. A jagged-toothed grin emerged. "Oh yes, he will do nicely." Turning back to the group behind him, "You may kill the rest of them. I have what I want." "No." Ishal rocked forward. The demons holding him being jerked along with his fierce movement. Stunned, the greater demon turned and leveled black orb eyes on Ishal. "You disapprove, mortal." Ishal clenched his teeth as the forest green eyes sparkled with promised malice. He growled, a sound deep and low. He tried, again, to pull his arms free. An ache rising up in his body, that called out to do unspeakable violence to the creature before him. "Very well, I will allow them to live. At least, to see the glorious transformation Irith will bestow on you." The demon lifted himself to full height, a good 6 inches taller than Ishal. He looked down on the mortal, delighted with his find. "Who the hell is Irith?" Ishal spat back. The name meaningless to him. A collective gasp emerged from the humans and demons alike. "You do not know of the god Irith." The demon closed in on Ishal's face until it blotted out all other sight. "He is the master of my plain and sworn enemy of you, precious goddess Siri Lursa. He will turn your world to ruin and bring her to his knees. I am a simple farmer. I leave the conflicts of gods to priests and scholars." Ishal leveled his eyes with the black eyes before him. "But if your Harith wants a word with me, you can tell him I said this." Ishal slammed his forehead into the demon's malformed face. A monstrous demon reached out a clawed hand in response to Ishal's defiant actions. It twisted Ishal's red curls, pulling his head so far back, he had to strain to see the demon leader's reaction to his blow. The thing grabbed its face with both hands. The demon turned away in obvious pain from Ishal's unexpected attack. It rocked for a moment trying to control its anger. Its rage. He wanted to kill the mortal more than anything at this moment, but he could not. This human was for his god, and Irith would have him. Pulling back its emotions, it lifted the dark eyes and snarled, "Bring me the ritual dagger." Turning back to Ishal, the corners of its lip lifted in a sneer. A punch landed to Ishal's stomach. Ishal bit back the pain, and gave a grin of his own. "You punch like a child." It was all for show. The earlier attacks to his body had done more than enough damage. Standing upright alone was torture in itself. But he would not allow the demons who surrounded him to gain pleasure from this knowledge. He could bite back his agony for the sake of human honor. A dagger was dropped in the demon's hand. It was arched at the hilt, and the blade curved. Its serrated length would inflict no small amount of damage to any unfortunate flesh that came in contact with it. "You will regret your words in a moment." The calmness of that statement, the certainty it carried, was enough to freeze a mortal soul. "I carry no regrets with me into death, aside I wasn't able to take you with me." Ishal snarled back. Then for good effort he spit in the demon's face. The demon closed his eyes, and slowly rose his arm to wipe his face with his long fingers. Shaking his hand, and then rubbing it on his finely embroidered robe. Death? What a lovely thought, but no. The demon raised the dagger and pulled it across its own hand. Your plane believes that death is the worst possible fate. To be removed from your happy little world? In my plane, we are well schooled in fates worse than death. Ishal felt the cold hand of dread descend upon him as the demon lifted his hand and squeezed the blood through his fist. The thick blackness running through his fingers and dripping to the earth. The clawed hands of the demons behind him clasped around Ishal's head, holding him tight. Now drink of my blood, and become Hurith's. The demon clamped his hand over Ishal's mouth. The meaning of the words exploding in Ishal's mind. The green eyes widening in revulsion as understanding of what was planned for him became clear. The demon blood was pooling in his mouth. Ishal choked against it. He tried to spit it out, but the demon's palm merely pressed harder against his lips. Ishal fought against their evil plan, until the blood spewed from his nose, blocking off his air. Drink it, stubborn human, and become one of us. The demon pressed his hand harder, until it slid between Ishal's teeth. In one last act of rebellion, Ishal bit down hard, his teeth tearing a chunk from the demon's hand. The monster only laughed as Ishal was forced to give in and swallowed hard. Daddy. It was a climax of nightmares to hear his son call for him. There was no doubt that the voice he heard was Triali. Ishal turned his head, and eyes as far as he could. The demons that held on to him had not relinquished their hold on him in the slightest. The sight of his son being led into the town square coming to vision. The green of his eyes, that had so represented the wild forests of this world, flashed with unholy light. The deep ember consuming them. But that was just an outer, more visible change that was taking effect. It was nothing compared to the darkness that was moving through his blood. It coursed through his veins, invaded every cell of his body. Took it. Claimed it. Changed it, and him. The boy broke free of the group he had been walking with. He rushed the demons that held his father. There was no fear in his small face, as he reached out to punch at the imps latched to Ishal's legs. Let go of my father. You are bad demons. Ishal felt the burn flowing through his body, and he went slack with it. He was alive in his mind. Wanting to yell to Triali to back away. If he could just say one word, run. It would have been enough, but he could not move. The lethargy in his form caused the demons to drop their hold on him. It was not the first time they had transformed a mortal. The sudden shock to the body could last hours, sometimes days. Ishal fell to the ground like a doll. He was sitting upright, but not even sure if it was under his own power or not. Triali was throwing his arms around him. What have they done to you, Daddy? What is happening to you? The green eyes that had mirrored his own pinched shut. The tossed brown curls brushing against Ishal's cheek. Ishal could not see the change, as his son did, but he could feel it. The fire was alive in his veins. It raced through him. He was truly and deeply terrified for the first time since this entire incident had started. It was because Triali was there, beside him, and there was no possible way he could protect his son. The thought caused something in him to awaken. It was foreign to him, resonating everywhere and nowhere all at once. The warmth of his son's hold overtaking his pain. The stamina he had expelled while fighting was returning. He lifted his arm, and brought his son close to his side. Looking up at the demons who encircled him. The new golden eyes locking with the black gaze of their demon leader. The demon scowled and turned a pointed look on Triali. You have a child? That will not do. Ishal tried to rise, but found he was still stuck in some suspended state that locked him in place. He did not like the way the demon was eyeing his boy. The cool tone of the voice defied the demon leader's meaning. Kill it. One of the great beasts yanked Triali away from Ishal's side. The large size of this demon making it possible to take up the child in one massive paw. The boy's neck snapped so quickly, before he even had time to cry out. Then the body was dropped before his father without thought. Ishal felt his mouth drop open. He stared down at his son's broken form. The light of life was gone from those brilliant green eyes, as they stared out. Ishal could not bring himself to breathe. replaying the moment back in his mind. He searched to make the connection and logic of what had just happened. One moment, Triali had been in his arms, and then? Ishal was unable to process the loss. A roar escaped him, the sound was far off even to his own ears. And he rose, breaking the spell that had held him. A fist shooting out toward the demon that had just slaughtered his son. Ishal's hand was white painted with the black demon blood racing through his veins. It pushed right through the thick hide of the giant demon, entering its body without thought. He did not have to put forth any effort as his fingers clenched down around the object of his wrath. With a sharp twist of his hand, Ishal pulled the blackened heart from its master's body. The blackness of the blood rushing down his arm and dripping to the ground. Ishal looked down at the quivering lump of flesh in his hand. Stunned at his own actions. The demon leader lifted his head and shook. He was unsure what he had just bore witness to was true. But he prudently backed away. The transformation was complete, and the human was already accessing Hurith's power. He had turned countless humans over the years for his demon god. Never had they displayed anything like this before. It was impossible. Master! Holy warriors! A demon voice screeched out. It broke into the tense moment that transpired. They are riding on the town. Curse them! The demonic general shot a look around him. He accessed the situation that he had found himself in. It would have been preferable to take their time dealing with a newly transformed human. Their great numbers could definitely subdue him given more time. Lead the mortals. Bring the man. We must retreat. Hearing the words of the demon, and his plan to escape some rising threat, Ishal launched himself into battle. He was not going to let those that had killed his son go. No. They would pay for the crime. One of the larger demons tried to reach out to pull him back. Ishal twirled, and let his fist fly. He was so blinded with rage he did not consider anything beyond vengeance for Triali. The punch connecting with the demon like it had a glass jaw. Blackness waved around Ishal's feet, and the lesser demons and imps backed away. They had heard the order from their leader, but they were not going to obey it. The horde was no stranger to pain and death. That is what stood before them in mortal form, and they all knew it. Turning, they tried to rush from the town. The main force ran directly into the charging horses of the Holy Temple's warriors, and chaos ensued. The force of Siri Lursa, backed with the power of the Holy Temple, was more than a match for that of Hurith's demonic army. The demon that had changed Ishal turned back from the wall of holy light that had been summoned before him. The power of the holy warriors charging into the town square wielding the power of the goddess Siri Lursa. With them, the light of their magic flowed through the area. It was incinerating any demons who were unwise enough to come in contact with it. The leader of the demonic horde was no stranger to holy warriors. He knew to avoid them. He turned for another avenue of escape, and came up against Ishal. The man's arms opened wide, refusing to allow the demon his escape. You? You dare to challenge me? It snapped back at Ishal, more annoyance then fear in those black as hell eyes. You are still immortal, and no more than food for Hurith's power. Ishal ignored the words. In truth, he did not even hear them. He was beyond caring what this monster had to say to him. Reaching out, Ishal grabbed the demon's arm in a vice-like grip, full of inhuman strength. Strength that was born of demonic blood and maddening sorrow. The demon general tried to break Ishal's hold, but Ishal slowly pulled the hand up between them. The ugly gash in the palm of its hand was exposed between them, and for a long moment nothing happened. They just stood that way. The evidence of the demon's evil actions filling the thick silence. Ishal did not change his facial expression as he twisted the arm of his foe with slow, deliberate intent. The crunching snap as the bone fractured within the flesh. Ripped the arm off at the elbow, as the demon screamed in suffering. The demon clenched its teeth in agony, as it reached out to clasp at his lost limb. Tossing the arm aside, Ishal reached out and grabbed it by the throat with one hand. The fingers of his hand slowly tightening. The demon's good hand reaching up trying to break Ishal's grip. The gruesome face twisting, and it gasped for air that would not come. Panic was consuming the demon, and it went for the dagger at its waist. pulling it up in a desperate attempt to strike back at Ishal. In a blink, Ishal grabbed the hand and turned the dagger back on itself. A smile lifted the corners of Ishal's mouth as his eyes flared with golden light. The dagger dropping down until it pierced the demon's chest, and descended into its heart. The light of the demon's eyes started to fade and Ishal twisted the knife harshly. The only wish left to Ishal was that this would ease some of the pain that was consuming him, but it did not touch that gaping hole in his heart. A void so large and black no words could describe it. The action did not go unnoticed. A holy warrior astride a large war horse pulled up before Ishal. He watched Ishal drop what remained of the demon's corpse to the ground. By the goddess! What are you? Ishal had no answers for that himself. So he ignored him and turned to where Triali's body lay on the ground.